know what Trump is going to do. Let's be frank. He's taking his orders from Netanyahu. He is not a free agent. He has people at home pushing him in particular directions. As a result, I don't see anything changing.
Possibilities or any pathways for Trump to put an end to this war, or is it simply impossible because the Iranians need to, I guess, evict the Americans from the region?
Netanyahu is in charge. So listen carefully to Netanyahu and you will know what Trump is going to do. Let's be frank. He's taking his orders from Netanyahu. He is not a free agent. He has people at home pushing him in particular directions. As a result, I don't see anything changing near term in Washington at all. Everyone will simply say, well, we'll continue to bomb. We'll continue to launch missile strikes, and eventually we'll be successful. We did that for 78 days over Kosovo, and ultimately it was not the air and missile war that persuaded the Serbs to get out of Kosovo. It was Russia's decision to pull the plug on the Serbs and say, no, we can't provide you with fuel and food and medicine over the winter. That happened because Strobe Talbot, the Deputy Secretary of State, went to Moscow and negotiated a deal, as President Trump likes to say. And the deal involved some numbers of promises we made to persuade the Russians to do that. The Russians now, in retrospect, regard that as a moment of deep shame in their history. And indeed, I think they're right. But I don't think they had much choice at that point. Well, they have a choice now. The Chinese have a choice. The rest of the world is no longer as weak as it once was. This is part of the groundswell of new changes in our civilization and world that the American government doesn't want to accept. We are in a fight at this point when it comes to missiles and rockets and conventional capabilities with almost a near peer, as they say. That's something we could never have imagined. And I think President Trump has expressed shock and surprise, just as Mr. Witkoff said, that the Iranians had not already capitulated. Because from their standpoint, based on their experience in the New York real estate business, this kind of damage is so terrible that you cry uncle and walk. You walk away, you submit, you sign the deal. Well, this is not real estate. This is not New York City. This is a civilizational state that absolutely will not surrender to the demands of the Jewish state in the Middle East that are then backed by American military power. So I don't think we're going to get very far with President Trump at this time. Maybe down the line, something will break. The one area that we haven't talked about that everybody needs to watch carefully is our bond market, especially the 10-year bond, and the yield will rise. Look at de-dollarization. Look at our financial weakness. Those things are important. I think we could end up in a very serious financial crisis, certainly worse than what we faced back in 2007 and 8. That is probably the other factor in this multivariate equation.
Yes, the one would be, of course, the military presence, and the military bases are being pummeled. But the second, of course, is the economic interest. But the third would be what you also alluded to, the U.S. credibility, that is as all-powerful, and essentially all countries that wants to have security should align itself with the U.S. How do you see the wider, I guess, geopolitical ramifications of this, of U.S. credibility being shattered in this way? Because this was seemingly what opposite of what Trump wanted. He wanted to build up a very, his whole approach, I think, is to show a lot of strength and hope that adversaries, stand down. And I thought this was also kind of the assumption that he would mount all this military force. As Witkoff said, Trump was very surprised they hadn't capitulated yet, given that they saw all of this U.S. military might. But what happens now if it becomes evident that it's the United States that has to walk this whole thing back and find something of a dignified exit?
Well, you're talking about an ignominious retreat, which is the last thing in the world that Donald Trump wants. We need to talk about, how do we get there from here? I mean, the problem is that we've already displayed in the first 24 to 36 hours our tactical expertise, our tactical supremacy, if you will. We managed to kill a number of key personalities, not only the supreme leader. Tactics win battles, but ultimately strategy wins wars. We have no strategy. When everybody asks, well, what's the purpose? Well, it sounded like it was regime change. Effectively, we made to pay a war tax that they never voted for. A $10 rise in crude means $15 billion in terms of the burden on the Indian economy. They're not the only ones. But we don't think in those terms. We don't think of what the impact is on others. There's no sense of this sort of thing. And we're going to pay, I think we're going to pay a terrible price, Glenn. And it's only just beginning.
When Trump came to power a year ago, he seemed to have some of the right ideas. Again, one of my concerns about the United States is it seems that the strategy of the past 30 years doesn't work anymore. That is, the United States exhausts itself and then incentivizes the other great powers to collectively balance it. So from my perspective, it made sense for the US to pull a bit back, then it can strengthen its position, and the Eurasian powers will, to a greater degree, balance each other. And it looked like Trump was heading in that direction. So pull back from Europe, from the Middle East, focus instead on the Western Hemisphere, and well, it all made sense. Doesn't mean the Venezuelan operation was, stroke of genius or anything, but at least he looked towards the homeland, if you will. What happened here? How? I mean, after a year, he's still in Ukraine. Again, that's one of the problems now. I think they gave away a lot of the air defense. Welcome back. We are joined today by Colonel Douglas Macgregor, a decorated combat veteran, author, and former advisor to the U.S. Secretary of Defense. Thank you for coming back on. We are now heading towards the end of day 3 of the war against Iran. And I think it's fair to say that I think Trump was hoping for a quick war, but it doesn't appear that there will be any quick regime change operation happening here. How are you assessing it, though? How should we, I guess, measure the developments of the war and what to expect?
I think the first thing we can say is that the Iranians have targeted at least 27 bases, including port facilities in the Middle East, ranging from Incirlik air base terrorism for a long time. So this is really about Israel's interest in destroying Iran and removing it as an obstacle to Israeli military hegemony or Jewish supremacy, however you want to put it. And we're into it. We're committed to it. And I think ultimately logistics will probably have a big impact because we will eventually run out of missiles. And I think we're on the road already because I just don't think President Trump or his advisors really believed that they would end up in a long war with Iran. And that's where they are right now.
Well, besides from the military targets, as you mentioned, we also seen attacks on ports, oil refineries, shipping, airports, some hotels. There seems to be several civilian targets as well. Did this take you by surprise? And how do you see the cost